Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's alumni webinar, How to Live and Lead with Your Lights On, featuring JMU alumni Shayna Hammond. My name is Emma Maynard, and I'm a proud double Duke of JMU and also the Assistant Director of Career and Network Programming here in the Office of Alumni Relations at JMU. Today's webinar is brought to you by the JMU Alumni Association, and we're so excited to bring you this alumni webinar program with the goal of providing career-related resources that help you conveniently cultivate your professional self. We have wonderful representation from our alumni joining us today, and I want to say thank you so much for participating. Before I introduce today's speaker, just some brief housekeeping notes. If you're participating live, please note that your microphones are muted for the presentation, but you do have a chat option. We are asking our participants to hold their questions, but during the presentation, as you have questions of the presenter, you can choose the Q&A box and send your question directly to me, the host, and I'll make sure that those are shared at the end of the webinar today for Shayna to respond to. We'd also love to see you live tweet during this webinar. You can use hashtag JMUAA-webinar. This webinar is also being recorded and will be accessed later next week in our Career and Networking Resources section of our website. However, as a token of appreciation for our participants engaging with us live today, you'll be entered into a drawing to receive a special prize courtesy of the JMU Alumni Association. Now I'd like to introduce our presenter, Shayna Hammond. As a child, Shayna experienced both the ugliness of racism and the redeeming power of a culturally inclusive teacher. So when she became a Teach for America Corps member in 2002, Shayna focused on inclusivity as a cornerstone to her leadership ethos. Her inner fire lit up her third-grade students at Baltimore Belmont's Elementary and earned Shayna the Peter Canham Award for the greatest academic gains of the TSA Baltimore Corps. And she went on to be named as one of 5 national finalists for the Sue Lehman Award for Excellence in Teaching. Shayna then took a position as a KIPP principal and was struck with the awesome privilege and profound responsibility of being a school leader. She experienced the challenges of being a young, ambitious leader, leading a diverse group of teachers, the negative impact of endemic racial and socioeconomic inequities on the educational system, the need for transformative school leaders to positively impact student learning outcomes, the lack of mentorship and support for school leaders, particularly those working in underserved communities. All of these experiences have shaped her personal leadership style and organizational values, which she'll share with you today. And with that, it's now my pleasure to introduce and turn it over to our guest speaker today, Shayna Hammond.
Thank you so much, Emma, and thank you to everyone participating. Today, I'm going to take you on a journey, on a personal journey that really resulted in shaping the 6 values that not only guide me as a person, but that now guide us as an organization at TeachLead. Now, I'm a teacher at heart, and so webinars aren't usually the medium that we use to do our work, and I'm used to, knowing my students and connecting and seeing everyone. And so just know this is a new medium for us. But because I'm a teacher at heart, I have to make it somewhat interactive. So if you don't already have a piece of paper in front of you, I invite you to get a piece of paper and a pen. And this is what I'm going to have us all do together. Okay. Think about 2 to 3 leaders that you admire and had the honor and privilege of knowing. Write down the characteristics that you admired about those leaders. So these are leaders that you actually know. So I'm not talking about Oprah or Barack Obama, unless you really do know them and have the privilege of directly being led by them. I mean leaders that you've actually worked for. And so just think about those characteristics. Maybe it's something that they taught you, maybe it's they're really good at product development or sales or delegation, or maybe it's how they lead. Maybe they're a trustworthy person. But just a stream of consciousness, just write down those characteristics as they come to mind. And if you're like me, I have a tough time sometimes writing and thinking while someone's talking. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking for about 10 seconds. We're all going to get through it. 10 seconds, stream of consciousness, those characteristics about those leaders that you admire. Go ahead. Okay, finish up those last thoughts. So this is what I want you to do with that list. I want you to categorize them into 3 categories: industry expertise, technique, and emotional intelligence. So look at your list, and for industry expertise, maybe it's something that that leader really knew how to do. It's some sort of content knowledge that they brought to the table that you really admired. Put those words in that box. Maybe it was how they did something. Maybe it's how they delegated. It's how they led. Put that under technique, any of those characteristics. And then everything else that don't really fit in those first 2 categories, put those under emotional intelligence. Now, we've done this exercise with several groups. And usually what happens is that there are the most characteristics either fall under technique or emotional intelligence. And here is why. This is our leadership framework at TeachLead. We believe that leadership is a combination of who you are, what you do, and how you do it. And you'll notice emotional intelligence is right smack dab in the middle. And emotional intelligence is how we manage our emotions and use them to lead and make decisions. And for those of you who are science majors or psychology majors can explain this way better than I can. But the quick and dirty is this. Our emotions are driven by the limbic system in our brain. While we may like to think that our decision-making comes from just logic and numbers and data, and of course we use those things to inform our decisions, at the very end of the day, the decisions we make are emotionally charged. Those of you in the marketing industry know exactly what I'm talking about. As consumers, things that we buy at the very end of the day are guided by an emotional attachment that we have to a particular brand, for sometimes reasons we don't even know. Today we're going to talk about, we're really going to focus on who you are, because that's what really connects us to values. Values guide behavior. Organizational values, when created well in a shared format and really truly lived, invite people to really connect to an organization. It really allows their clients to be excited and to feel connected to what they're doing. So that's what I'm going to basically do today. I'm going to tell a series of stories of my personal, just from my personal journey and how they all added up to what we call now TeachLead, which was founded in 2012. So that's me when I was 5 years old, and that's actually me on my very first day of school in kindergarten in Pinckney, Michigan. I don't know how many people I have here who have roots in Michigan, but Pinckney is a rural town about 2 hours outside of Detroit. And I'm quite certain we were the first Black family to ever set foot in Pinckney, Michigan. So shortly after that picture was taken, I was so excited to get on the bus and walk by myself just a couple feet down the way to get on the bus. As soon as I got on the bus, all of the students moved to the edge of their seats. At first it was quiet, and then the shouting came. Students called me things like monkey and nigger and dirt, and they threw things at me. And worse yet, the bus driver just kept driving. She didn't say anything, she didn't stop it. And so I spent the drive to school swaying up and down the aisle, not knowing why the other children didn't like me. I remember the next day, my father having a conversation with the bus driver. Not sure exactly what was said, but I had an assigned seat behind the bus driver for the rest of the school year, and no one sat next to me for that entire year. So that was my introduction to both school and race on the very same day. Now, we didn't live in Pinckney too much longer after that. We moved to what's called Okemos, Michigan, which is your typical suburban town, and it's about 25 minutes outside of Lansing. I spent there from about middle of first grade to fifth grade. While there, I was one of maybe 4 Black children in the school. And I never experienced anything like I experienced in Pinckney, but I experienced more implicit racism. I was seated in the back of the classroom constantly. The tone that some teachers would use toward me was definitely a little different, a little bit more distant than what they would use towards other students. I was tracked into all of the lowest reading groups, and I just thought that school just wasn't fun and it wasn't really for me. And I had developed just the idea that for whatever reason, I just wasn't as smart as the other students in the class. So flash forward until 5th grade. So when I turned 10, shortly after turning 10 and going to the 5th grade, my family moved to Washington, D.C. Now, Washington, D.C. is where my father grew up. And they enrolled me in D.C. public schools. And this was the first time that I really had experienced a diverse classroom. And it was the first time that I had my very first Black teacher, Mr. Beasley. I will never, ever forget Mr. Beasley. Mr. Beasley was one of those teachers that everyone, including the principal, revered. He was that teacher that had high expectations, that gave a lot of homework, and had that kind of eerie sense of knowing exactly what was going on at all times. He also had that ability to feel like, you know, he really knew you, and everyone felt like that, not just me. He would spend some afternoons with lots of students. I remember one particular afternoon he spent with me doing a collage, a self-esteem collage, basically. It's not what he called it, but I now know what it was. But he had me clip out images of intelligence and images of positive girls and what it all meant. And it was the first time that someone really explicitly talked to me about the potential that he saw in me of leadership. And when I think of Mr. Beasley, I think of this quote by James Baldwin: "If I love you, I have to make you conscious of the things you don't see." So that experience definitely stuck with me and served as kind of a turning point in my life. And from that point forward, I became a high achiever. I achieved in school and outside of school, on sports fields, and I actually earned my way into the honors program at JMU. And I just, you know, sometimes think about if I'd not had Mr. Beasley, who knows where I'd be today, but I'm very grateful that I did. So, flash forward from 5th grade to the intersection of story and career. So as all of you know, of course, I went to JMU, and JMU experience was just really when, I'm sure like a lot of you, I was kind of connecting the dots of my childhood and experiences and just trying to figure out life. And just trying to figure out, you know, why I had so many different schooling experiences, from Pinckney to Okemos to Washington, D.C., and then to a private Catholic school for high school before coming to JMU. I took some Soch classes, I took, you know, some African American studies courses, I took Dr. Warner's leadership class, and I really put together all the dots. And at the end of the day, where I landed was on a love of children and a love of education. And I just knew that I had to spend the rest of my life doing meaningful work and something that really spoke to me. And it just seemed that all of the experiences, many of them that I had, were just there to prepare me to become a teacher. And so I did. So this picture you see right here is when I became a principal of Kipujima Village Academy in Baltimore, Maryland. So I was a principal from 2005 to 2008. I was a wickedly young principal, and I learned a ton about leadership, a ton about myself. I fell on my butt several times, but I got back up every single time. And these students right here earned the spot as the highest performing school in Baltimore City. And those 8th graders in the back in those black shirts, they had the highest math scores out of all students in the state of Maryland. And we did that because our team believed in a mission and a vision much, much greater than ourselves. And speaking of falling on my butt, while, you know, we did a lot together and we achieved a lot, I'm going to tell a little story of how one of my teachers, I want to say this was in my 2nd year. I'll never forget, one of my teachers emailed me and said she wanted to have a conversation the next day and that it was very important. And so, of course, I made time in my schedule, And she sat down and she was noticeably nervous. And this is a teacher, you know, I had for several months. And so I became to kind of get a little nervous because I didn't know why she was so nervous. But she kind of stumbled over her words and she said, you know, Shayna, I just don't know where you stand on some things. And I have to ask you something. She said, I'm just really struggling because as an 8th grade English language arts teacher, you know, we invite our students to make a lot of text to self connections. And we ask them to really make those connections to their lives. And as a teacher, a reading teacher, I model that. But I find myself masking myself sometimes and not really sharing some, you know, really important things to me in my life. And she said, you know, I don't know where you stand on this, but I'd really like to be able to share and come out to my students and let them know that I have a wife and, you know, that we're married and that we're proudly gay. And my first reaction internally was like, I'm a Black woman. You know, of course that's okay. You know, why would she think that's not okay for her to be her authentic self and be able to feel freely about that? But upon reflection and then talking with her more and more about, you know, why she, you know, wanted to do it and why she felt nervous approaching me, what I had to come to the realization is, as a cisgendered straight woman, you know, that's a privilege that I have. And that I definitely was not explicit about, you know, students and teachers being able to come out who were not straight. And so I learned a lot that year about cultural proficiency, a lot about myself, a lot about leadership and the importance of being really, really crystal clear about what your vision means and making sure that it's as inclusive as possible. So moving on from there, like I said, I was principal for about 3 years. And during that 3-year period, I got married. And I just did not have a vision for how I could be a high-performing school leader and at the same time be a high-performing, well, not high-performing, but a loving, nurturing wife and mother. I had babies on the brain. I definitely wanted to have children. I knew I wanted to have more than one, and I just didn't see how I could do both. And so I stepped down as principal. And that is when the idea and the vision for TeachLead was born. The 2 questions that I had leaving school leadership were these. How can school leaders attain and sustain school leadership success for many years? And what skills and conditions matter most? So I sat on these problems for a while. After leaving the principalship, I went on and worked for the school system at Baltimore City School District, and I supported other school leaders. I met with the then superintendent, and I actually pitched to him my idea for TeachLead, and he said, that sounds great, but we don't have anything like that here, so let's try to find you something close. And he did. I worked in the secondary schools office, and I supported secondary schools and their school leaders, and we created a culture of learning. I did some coaching and, you know, just kind of had a blast with just kind of testing what it really meant to support school leaders. Soon after that, I was asked by KIPP to lead their National Teacher Leader Cohort and to train teachers around the country to become principals. And at that same time, KIPP was trying to solve the same problem. They had created what's called the 6-Year Principal Project. And they created a core research team, and they asked me to be a part of it to really dive into principal sustainability and what it means for principals to be effective. And what came out of that study after a year were 4 vital behaviors that led to principal effectiveness and sustainability. And lo and behold, one of the 4 was coaching. And there it was, again, around 2011, coaching was being raised as a huge contributor to success. And it's coaching, it's a coach that I desperately wanted as a young principal. And so in 2012, I jumped out on faith and I started TeachLead to really answer these 2 questions. So the second questions I want to really hone in on. What skills and conditions matter most? Now the skills piece, there's lots and lots of research around the skills. And we formed 5 core competencies taken from lots of different leadership frameworks around the country. And those skills are strategic planning and execution, self-awareness, people leadership and management, cultural proficiency, and instructional leadership. Now, when it comes to conditions meaning culture, what needs to be a part and just integral in a school community in order for not just the school leader to stay, but also for teachers, for students, and for staff members. And we arrived at these 6 values: love, integrity, grit, humility, trust, and service. So at TeachLead, when we talk about love, of course, I think about Mr. Beasley. You'll see in our definition, love includes, it invites, it sees potential. He saw something in me I didn't see in myself. In our coaching, we strive to do the same thing for our clients, especially our school folks, our school leaders, our teachers, our chief academic officers. Integrity. Integrity is about authentic leadership, aligning who you are with what you do, and making sure that we as coaches, of course, meet those promises. Grit. Growth takes grit. If I didn't have grit, at least some semblance of it when I was 5 on that bus, I could have easily, succumbed to a victim mentality and really been angry. And instead, I chose curiosity. I chose wonder and put the pieces together and turned what was some horrible experiences into a vision that's now greater than me. Humility. I definitely learned a lot from one of my teachers. And that's just one story of thousands I could tell of how many times over the years I've learned about myself and learned about leadership. And really, at the end of the day, leadership is about that constant journey of self-renewal and self-growth. Trust. So, of course, as most of you know, trust is the foundation of any team. And for anyone to be able to trust what we do, what comes first and foremost when you're talking about values for yourself is you have to trust yourself. I trusted myself enough in 2012 to jump out on my own and really create a coaching practice focused on school leaders, and I could not be happier about that. Service. So when we talk about service, we talk about really service meaning vision-oriented. Service to a purpose, service to a vision and a mission that's greater than ourselves. That's what helps guard against savior mentality and really making sure that we're serving holistically, the whole person. And speaking of vision, after coming to and arriving at these values, these are all bound by our vision. At TeachLead, we see a world relieved of its most pervasive and systemic troubles through the leadership of authentic men and women, boldly committed to creating an inclusive and equitable world for all. So that's pretty big. And we know that that is something we're going to be working toward for the rest of our days. And of course, our hope is that this is something that, of course, lives beyond our team of 6 right now, and it's something we can pass on to generations to come. And in order to create and bring this vision to fruition, our mission, what we do every single day to actualize that vision, it's really simple. We coach leaders, and by coaching leaders, we strengthen schools. Now, flash forward to the present. What started as a coaching program and a coaching concept for principals, which is actually called our Ignite Principal Coaching Program, has expanded into 5 different programs. So what you're looking at now is our TeachLead Coaching Continuum. So again, what started as focusing laser-like on solving a very specific problem with school leaders now has become a systemic transformative continuum whereby we are set up now in such a way where we can coach entire districts and school organizations. So if you look at the arrow at the bottom, Ignite, the second bubble, that's where we started. That's our principal coaching program. If you look to the left is the Ablaze program. What was happening in the first couple of years when we were coaching principals, they were getting tremendous success. We love to tell the story about one particular principal named Deneen, who after 2 years in our coaching program earned the highest gains out of all 99 DC charter schools and her school was lauded by the mayor, and just years before, it was in danger of closing. And so what was happening was our school leaders, their supervisors, which are chief academic officers and CEOs and superintendents, they were telling us, this is great. We're noticing changes in our principals, and we're also noticing that they're managing up in a different way, and they're using different language, and they're walking in a different way, and we want some of that. And so we formalized that, and Ablaze is executive leadership coaching specifically for senior leaders. And to date, now we've not only coached senior leaders in the education sector, but it is a program that can transcend the education sector, and I'll talk a little bit more about that because some of you may be interested in that. So what was also happening was after our principals were having success, they would come to us and say, you know, this is great. I'm having a tough time, though, turn-keying what I'm learning with my coach to my leadership team. So we started what's called the SPARK program. It's the SPARK Leadership Team Development Program. And that program is specifically tailored for leadership teams within schools. So those are your assistant principals, your academic deans, grade level chairs, and teacher leaders. And it's a time for principals to actually learn alongside of their teams at the same time, so everyone is speaking the same language and they can move quicker and get the results that they're seeking. Illuminate. The Illuminate program is for any organization who wants to operationalize diversity and inclusivity. I call this our goosebump work. We piloted this program 3 years ago in the highest performing charter management organization here in DC. They were already extremely high performing and been high performing for 10 years. They reached out to us because they knew one of our core competencies was cultural proficiency. And they said, you know, we feel pretty strong in the other areas, but we know cultural proficiency is an area it's a growth area for us. And we're not sure where to get started. We've never really had an organizational discussion about race, about equity, about what it means here, about the students we serve. And we really don't know where to get started. And so for the past, I worked with them for 2 years. And after 2 years, they have completely revolutionized how they do talent, how they build their student culture, how they cultivate their staff culture, to how they invite parents as partners. It was an incredible ride. It's a 4-step process that really is for any organization, not just school organizations, who really want to move from the conversations around implicit bias and systemic racism and oppression, and really want to translate that conversation into action, into true policy and behavior change. So that's our Illuminate program. Finally, the last program, this is a program that we're writing right now. It's called the Radiate program. Radiate is our coaching certification program, tailored specifically who we have in mind, while this will be offered for anyone who wants to be certified in coaching, who really will benefit and who's aligned with what we're trying to do are those folks in school districts who manage principals. So it's basically teaching them what we do in Ignite. It's teaching them the art and science of coaching, while also adding really important principles around emotional intelligence and cultural proficiency. When we say we coach the whole person, when we say holistic, we definitely mean mind, body, spirit, emotion, alignment, and we also mean the cultural considerations that definitely impact how we show up as leaders and how we show up in our lives. So what started again as a problem, what started as, you know, experiences, has really turned into an offer and an invitation for transformation for leaders that none of us really on the team could have thought possible alone. And we're really grateful to be able to do that. So a little bit more about Ablaze. So like I mentioned, it's holistic development, it's one-on-one leadership, and it's a 6-month commitment for anyone who really wants to take an integrated approach to development. Our leaders come to us with personal leadership goals as well as professional leadership goals. And it's all virtual, so you do not have to be based in Washington, D.C. And lots of leaders have gotten outcomes like strengthened leadership presence and impact and influence, and most importantly, client-driven professional and personal goal attainment. We take those goals personally. Something we always say is at the end of the day, our leaders' goals are our goals. So I want to end today like we end our coaching sessions. There's a two-part ending. So the first ending is we invite our clients to do what's called leadership reflections. So we'll ask them, based upon our conversation today, what leadership reflections do you have? So these reflections can either be big picture ahas, or they can be very tactical. Like, for example, I'm going to go have this authentic conversation that I've been putting off for the past 2 months with one of my direct reports. Or it could be a big aha. I didn't realize that I have a bias, an age bias, and who knew? And I'm looking at who I've hired, and I'm looking at who I've promoted, and I'm noticing a trend that definitely wasn't intentional, but it's showing up, and I need to unpack why. And so there are 3 questions that I'd offer you today based upon what we've, I want to say discussed, but what you've heard. So the first one, as you're thinking about, I imagine some of you are thinking about this in 2 ways. You may be thinking about your personal values and how you live your own life and what drives you. Some of you may be entrepreneurs and you're thinking about the values that you've created or are creating with your teams. Or you're in an organization right now and you're like, you're going down, what are our company's values again? And you're looking them up and you're saying to yourself, are these the right ones? And these are just questions, that I would just offer to you no matter where you are, in your career trajectory. When thinking about both those values that you want to use to drive how you live and how you lead, first, what inspires you? What are you passionate about? What wakes you up in the morning? What gets you going? What gets you excited? What would you do if you, just for free? What would you do for free? And what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? What inspires you? The next question to ponder, and the questions to ponder aren't questions that you're necessarily going to have an answer to right now. These really are to ponder for, the next couple days, maybe couple weeks. The next one, what experiences in your life inform who you are today? So hopefully you saw how some of my experiences, added up and really served as the foundation to the vocation that I picked, but deeper than just the vocation of education, of teacher and principal and now entrepreneur, it's the how, right? It's how that I've decided, and the how is really coaching. At the end of the day, it's when people coached me, it's when they saw me, but they allowed me to lead, and they gave me space to really think and really come up with the answers myself. And they created a safe environment for me to be able to do that. So what experiences in your life, what are those turning points, those times in your life where it got really hard and you had to really rely on, your determination or your spirituality? What were those experiences that really inform who you are today? And then after you think about those experiences, think about that common thread that runs throughout all of your experiences. When I think about that common thread, in a word, determination comes through. When I think about that common thread, what really pulled me out of a lot of situations was humility. It was when I got humble and I got honest with myself and, about where I needed to grow, and I got really honest about my blind spots, and I allowed, I received feedback and I used that feedback to get better. So look for that common thread amongst the experiences in your life. And then 3, what do you need in order to be and give your best? So this is very personal. At the end of the day, for the values for your life, what kinds of things do you need to have? And I mean just basic things too, in terms of water and what kind of food and what kind of sleep do you need? And then if you're thinking about, I need to drink more water, I need to do this, I need to do that, well, think about what behaviors that you either need to change, remove, or replace. What are those patterns that need to happen in habit in order for you to have what you need in order to be your best? So I'll conclude by saying, when we're talking about values, it's really important that you connect with them emotionally. If you're in an organization and they, have been around for decades, it's important that either you ignite or suggest or someone within the organization has a talk about those and allows for folks to really emotionally connect and pick them apart and make sure everyone, really has the same definition for each of those words. And making sure that they're not just aspirational, right? Because at the end of the day, they really do have to translate into behavior. Because values at the end of the day are truly meant to be lived. So thanks so much for taking some time out of the day and for listening to my story and for listening to how it has informed how I live my life and how I lead. And I hope it was helpful to you in some way today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shayna, for sharing your stories and your experiences and how, really from the start you took negativity and transformed that into almost a movement of positive social and educational change through Teach to Lead, and also sharing with us some exercises on how we can align our own careers and personal lives with emotionally tied and connected values. I do have some questions coming in that I hope you would take a little bit of time to answer for us today. So the first one, just because you are a Duke, is JMU related. So if you could just talk a little bit about specifically your time at JMU and some of the things that really, from that time helped build or develop your character and shaped you, maybe professionally or personally, and have really had an impact with who you are and how you live today.
Okay. So that was back I graduated in 2002. I loved my JMU experience. I really, really did. One piece that I go back to, and I think I referenced it in the talk, is Dr. Warner's class on leadership. That was the first time of all the classes that really kind of got into the importance of, aligning who you are with what you do. He did a fabulous job on just really inviting all of us as students to think beyond just kind of like your vocation and how much money you want to make, and really into legacy and what you want to do and give for other people. So I reference that class a lot. It's one of those classes that stuck with me. During my experience, I was an RA at Eagle Hall my second year, and I'll say, I learned a lot in terms of they had, classes and seminars on leadership, and what I didn't really realize what I was learning then, which actually did translate when I became a principal, was really what we were learning was impact and influence. We were learning how to influence people when you don't necessarily have positional power, and you need to kind of, rally people around following certain rules and creating an environment that works for everyone. And I do give that a lot of credit. I didn't realize that's what we were doing then, but I definitely see how it added to really help me, especially when I became a principal. I also, JMU had so many opportunities. Something I talk about all the time is how many opportunities we had to be leaders. I was a part of many organizations. I had the honor and privilege of becoming the president of a kinesiology organization, PEK, and I learned a lot about leadership, a lot about my own leadership style. We had a very diverse team and diverse membership, and we had a lot of fun doing some service projects together. And so when I think about JMU, I really do think about all of the leadership opportunities and just the conversations about what it means to be a leader.
That's wonderful. And I think we can all agree, those of us who are in some way, whether we're alumni or just connected to the JMU community, can see and feel that impact in our everyday lives. Another question that came in is, how do you continue to develop your skills? So what sort of professional development opportunities do you seek, such as conferences? Do you attend webinars like this that you have found really impactful for both your industry, but also, again, just personally, your interests?
Yes, I am a self-proclaimed nerd. I love to learn. So I've attached myself and just kind of dove into lots of different things. So when I first started Teach to Lead, I found out about an organization called Activate, and it's an all-women's entrepreneurship program. So I was not a business major. I do not have an MBA. I had a passion and I had a network. And I needed, I knew I needed to add up some business acumen, some expertise. And so I surrounded myself with other entrepreneurs who were doing the same thing. And I met some mentors who now serve on my advisory board. So that was a huge experience for me that really led to my development. I'm also a spiritual life coach. I was a participant of Iyanla Van Zant's spiritual life coaching program. So I've always known that I've wanted to take a holistic approach to coaching, and I was looking for a way to infuse that into, traditional coaching principles. And knew I needed to think outside the box and also, kind of surround myself with people who were outside of the education sector. And then to kind of, balance that out, I also participated in Georgetown University's coaching program and became what's called ICF certified, International Coaching Federation, which in the coaching world is considered the gold standard in coaching certification. And so I did that, of course, once again, to really immerse myself in the coaching world and really study it and honor it and bring the best of it to the education sector.
So you're definitely involved in a lot of things, and that really showcases how we as individuals can continue to progress and build our career and professional development by being engaged in as many things as possible that pique those interests. Let's see, we have a few more questions coming in. So being a leader, when you think of a traditional leader, there's always the decisions that are made that are popular and people look at you in that spotlight, but there's also, the less popular decisions or things that need to be made in certain leadership roles. So what's your advice on conquering that fear to be a leader in both of those scenarios when, let's say, you have to kind of make a decision that isn't going to let everyone be, happy at the end?
Yeah, I'll take it back to a story that I told, especially unpopular decisions. So when that teacher said she wanted to come out, there were some other teachers who approached me and said, I heard that this teacher wants to come out, and I think it's a horrible idea. I think that, that means we're going to be teaching homosexuality, and, our parents aren't going to agree with that, and I don't agree with that either. I think it's it's a terrible idea. And there were several teachers that approached me separately. To my surprise, too, I did not know that's how they felt about it. And so I called a staff meeting, and I said, this is what we're going to do. This is what this teacher has brought, and I just want to make it crystal clear that I am 100% behind her. And should there be any, concerns from parents or family members, feel free to send them my way. But, our mission says all. Our mission is about inclusivity, and I brought it back to mission and vision and values. And so the first thing I would say, it's easiest to stand in the face of unpopular decisions when you have been so clear about your vision and mission and your values, and the alignment is tight. It's harder when it's not as tight because it leaves more room for people kind of to take things personally, and for you as a leader to take it personally. But I knew what I had behind me was a vision and a mission, and a personal value system that stood behind her 100%. And so, it definitely helped me stand taller and more confident. And in the end, of course, it all worked out. In terms of popular decisions, I would say even popular decisions, the same thing. It's really important that even if it's popular, people understand the alignment and the why behind the decision is popular, and connecting it to your overall mission so that it's not, they're not attributing that popular decision to you as a person, And that's where ego work comes into play, right? And making sure that, you know, when you're getting accolades or getting the, yes, that was a great decision, that you're able to separate that from you yourself, but from you having the wisdom to stay in alignment with your vision, mission, and values.
Yes, that's really, really good advice, and I think it does showcase how leadership is both, you know, can be a positive thing, but also have those challenges that you have to kind of dig deep to overcome for what's, you know, best for everybody. Another question that we had for you was, so what is, you know, kind of your advice or thoughts for those that are, you know, mid-career, you know, they're happy with what they're doing, but it's not necessarily that passion. Maybe they have a passion, but it's scary to kind of leap fully into that, you know, speaking to you as an entrepreneur. What's kind of your advice for those that are kind of dabbling on the side with something and maybe you're thinking about taking the full plunge?
Of course. So first, I would just invite those folks to really ask some important questions first. You know, why am I not emotionally connected to what I'm doing right now? What is it really? Is it the people? Is it the mission? Is it how we're doing what we're doing? First, I think it's important to get really clear on why. If you come out of that process and you're like, nope, you know, I have given all that I'm here to give, and it's really time for me to do something new, I'm just a little afraid about that. Then the next step I would advise is to just put yourself out there just first by asking questions. And by what I mean is of the right people. So seek those people doing things either exactly what you want to do or similar to what you want to do, and just pick their brains, have coffee with them, say, how'd you do that? That's what I did right before I started TeachLead. I reached out to consultants I had met along the way, and I said, you know, how did you do this? How did you decide whether you wanted to be an independent consultant versus, you know, building a team, a small team, and a big team in the future? What did that look like? I had a series of coffees, and it really eased a lot of my fears, especially hearing how scared they were. And in some cases, figuring and like hearing how much easier it was than I was perceiving it to be in some cases. And so first, I would just kind of do some research, talk to folks. And it's interesting, you know, I'm a firm believer when you start putting things out there, you invite it back. And so when I started just kind of saying to people, you know, I don't know if I'm going to do this, but this is what I'm thinking. People started talking on my behalf, and people started reaching out, and that's how I was able to source my first clients. Some of the best business advice actually came from my accountant in the early days, and he said, you know, Shayna, what makes a business? And I was like, money, clients? He's like, exactly. And he said, stop writing your business plan and go get clients. That was some of the best advice. I was stuck in the kind of business planning mode and stuck in a story that I wasn't prepared, right? Like all T's had to be crossed, all I's had to be dotted, and I wasn't prepared. I needed to take one more course from one more organization. But when I just kind of stopped and started meeting with, you know, prospective clients and gaining more clients, it was actually the principals that we started working with. I mean, they were the ones who gave us all the answers. I learned a ton from every single client. And of course, along the way, I met who are now my teammates, who now share the vision and the mission and are doing great work across the country. So I would say, you know, first, see why, you know, do some introspection. 2, start talking to folks. And then 3, jump out there, you know, and start testing it out. And, you know, I think you'll learn a lot about yourself. You'll learn a lot about the industry and whatever it is you're trying to accomplish. And then when I was going to say when you're ready, but you probably won't ever feel ready. It's just at some point you just have to do it.
Mm-hmm. Strong. I like that powerful ending there. We do have one more question that kind of came in piggybacking off of that. This person asked that often we find that pursuing our passions requires sacrifice in areas we are not able to wrap our minds around sacrificing. Could you speak about how your pursuit of your passion maybe has impacted your work-life balance, for example, with your family or parenting?
Yes, that's a big one. That's a big reason why I started TeachLead. When I started TeachLead, my children were 2 and 3 years old. They're 5 and 7 now. They're 1 and 3. They were really young. And they're back-to-back 18 months apart. And, you know, one of my goals was to be a great mom and do what I love. I was very clear that I wanted to keep working, that I wanted to serve in education in some way, shape, or form, and that I wanted to coach. And so the first thing I had to do was I had to reframe that word sacrifice. I don't like that word. Because when I think about sacrifice, you know, you're always thinking of losing. It comes really from a mindset of scarcity. And through the help of some coaches and mentors that I have, I reframed that to, we don't even say, you know, within our organization, we don't say life balance, work-life balance. We say work-life harmony and rhythm. We talk a lot about rhythm. And what I've come to understand is that I'm going to have different rhythms in my life. You know, there are some seasons where, you know, work is going to be a little bit busier than, you know, family life. But that, of course, priority-wise, my family comes first. I come first, my family comes first, and then the business. But first and foremost, I had to really kind of take the pressure off a little bit in trying to seek whatever this kind of balance thing was, and really remind myself that it's personal and that it looks different. Everybody has their own rhythm. And I'm a pretty good planner, and so I got really meticulous about my calendar to kind of get really tactical. I have themes for my days, and this is something we coach our clients to do. And so, for example, on Fridays, for the first like 3 years of the business, I refused to serve clients on Fridays because Fridays were the days that most times my kids, my own children, had field trips. It was important to me that, you know, that I was a chaperone on field trips. I've always been a room parent of one of my children's classrooms. And so whenever I look at my calendar, I put my children's calendar in first before I start putting in my calendar and my appointments for my clients and for my team, et cetera. And I designed my life completely around, you know, my family and what we need, and then I'm able to do that as an entrepreneur, as a founder, which I'm very grateful for. But even when I wasn't working for myself, I got really clear about what boundaries I had, you know, for myself. You know, from 5 o'clock p.m. until 9 o'clock p.m., I would let folks know, you won't hear from me. I won't check email. I don't check text. I'm a tech-free. It's a tech-free zone because that's the time I want to be fully present for my children. And that's our time. And, you know, yes, I'll hop back on and tie up some loose ends from 8 to 9, but I've also had to get really disciplined about shutting it down, you know, in the evenings and not working until I go to sleep. And so in a nutshell, I think it takes some reframing, and I think it takes a lot of intentionality and boundary setting.
Thanks, Shayna. And then we just have one final question here. And you talked a little bit about it, mentioning some mentors. For you, you know, could you talk a little bit more about your mentorship relationships, how you've really structured what that looks like, either personally or in coaching when you maybe talk to others about finding a mentor? What does that really look like?
Yeah, for me, because I love cohort learning, I've been a part of I always say I'm probably going to be a part of someone's cohort forever until the end of my days. But cohort learning is actually a great place to meet people. One of the intentions I set before I become a part of some sort of, you know, learning process, I look for instructors or speakers who speak to me, right? Who I connect with either emotionally, professionally, and I make a point to follow up with them and build a relationship. So most of my mentors and now business advisors have come through programs that I've been a part of. and we've built lasting relationships. There's one actually mentor I was just emailing with this morning. She was actually a former client from our early days who has since retired. And it's become a beautiful relationship where she, just really wants to see us succeed. And so we have regular meetups, and, she's giving me very, very helpful introductions and that kind of thing. And so they've really just kind of come in the work as I meet people and immerse, myself. I don't think I've ever gotten, a mentor from, a networking event or, one of kind of those one-offs. Usually it's a part of a very intentional program, or it's, based upon a relationship that we had built previously in a, working capacity, and it just kind of grew over time. Some are more formalized than others. Through the Activate program, we were able to get as Activate members. I'm also a member of what's called the Maryland Center for Entrepreneurship. And we have office space there, and a part of being being a part of that incubator space, you're matched with a business mentor. And I could not be happier with who I've been matched with. They're very intentional about it. She used to run Crayola, and she's been a very successful education entrepreneur many times over again. And so I was just very, very grateful, very blessed to cross paths with her. And so I would say, the advice I usually give to that is to seek programs, 6-month, 4-month programs that really speak to you, and programs that you can learn from, and just be really intentional about the relationships you build while you're there.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shayna. And we had some great questions come in, and you had wonderful responses. Is there anything final that you wanted to share regarding your contact information here on the final screen?
Oh, yes. Feel free to visit our website, www.teachlead.com. You can find more information about all of our programs, about our mission, our vision, our values. The definitions are there as well. And feel free to reach out to us directly at info@teachlead.com. We have one-pagers with pricing and all kinds of details if you're interested. And again, we are really focused right now and for the next 5 to about 7 years in the education sector. But the grand vision for TeachLead is to transcend the education sector and to work with other communities, law enforcement, and other education-facing organizations and sectors. And so even if you're not an educator and you'd like some more information, feel free to reach out to us.
Thanks so much, Shayna. Well, on behalf of the JMU Alumni Association, I want to thank everyone for their time today, and Shayna in particular for her presentation. If our participants could take a moment to complete the survey that you'll be redirected to when you exit the webinar, we would really appreciate your feedback, as it helps us to continue to provide a tailored program for you, our alumni. We hope that you'll join us for our next webinar. It's a homecoming special edition next Friday, October 28th at 12 Eastern Standard Time, called Red Zone to End Zone, What a Change Leader Can Learn from JMU Football, featuring 1992 JMU alumni April Armstrong, as she shares the key lessons that every leader should learn in order to successfully guide their team to score. If you or an alumni you know is interested in presenting, please have them contact me at maynaref@jmu.edu. Thanks again, everyone, and I hope you have a wonderful afternoon.